Phenomena. 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 Phenomena.
Hey, good afternoon. Well, we continue our series for HR, I guess is what I've been concentrating on right now. And this would be discrimination. And discrimination is something that we all have. We all have some form of discrimination. But as humans, we can stop doing it. And what I just wanted to go over today is types and how you can stop them, what roles you play, and pretty much that. Now, as I mentioned, everyone does discrimination. So that's where we will start our conversation. Okay, the first type of discrimination we're going to talk about is something called direct. And direct discrimination would be when you or someone else has a joke told, or they are discriminatory face value. Everyone knows this discrimination. You know, I only blah blah blahs wear red pants. That would be direct. Now, when you hear that kind of joke, it's up to you to do something. You shouldn't have to wait for a person to come and say something to you about that. You should be able to pull the person who said that aside, or actually this is a backroom meeting, and saying that was inappropriate. That is not allowed in our store. Now, nowadays it's a lot more difficult, and you should write down the situation. You should also write down any witnesses. Just so if it goes any further, you show that you've done something. You also, I forgot to say, want to mention that the person who had the accusations against them, and also the person who said something. Now, if a person does bring in a concern to you, then you follow the same steps. But you ask them to make a written statement so that you have something to go on and ask who to interview. Now, any discrimination is an A1 number of importance. If somebody comes to you and complains about it, you push everything else aside. You don't worry that you have a report to do and such. You just get on and report the accusations, what needs to be done. Pure and simple. You also want to talk it over with your HR and your store managers or any other senior managers over you. Now next is indirect, and that's when things are said about someone where this person didn't hear of it. Now, this can be very open. You know, you could hear it when they don't hear it. Now, indirect will only be reported to you when someone else is really turned off by the whole situation. Now, Indirect needs to be handled very quickly. Now, you may be able to, you know, go and keep it pretty secret, but you still need to follow the same. You still need to write it down. You still need to take place, write down who the witnesses are, and then you could also go to your HR and find out what steps should be taking place. Now, there's also group discrimination. And group discrimination is when a person is discriminated based on they are with the same religious group or someone who holds the same convictions. You want to ensure that you don't fall into this. Now, someone could be given a position over someone else because that person, he joins the Boy Scouts, he can't work weekends, they have to go camping all the time. Well, that is not acceptable. And any manager that does that should not be in a managerial position. A manager is responsible for all his employees. It's the best to go for all the employees. And there's, you have to ask every person, just like every religion has people who follow it. And then there's people that say they are, and then they'll only follow it if need be. They're a good example of this. There's some Christians are very devout, and every Sunday they go to church. Some even go on Wednesdays, and they follow every word of the book. And then there are Christians that say they're Christians, haven't been to church or that in years, but they still call themselves Christians. So that doesn't bother them that they have to, let's say, work a Sunday. So you need to ensure that you discuss this with the employee. You don't need to make any assumptions or assume anything, tongue tied there, about any one of your employees. And holding them back, when they have the skills, is just wrong. You need to ensure that you, as a manager, get the best person for the job. And not saying, well, this person does such and such for his church on Fridays. That's when we have our meetings. We tried it before, it didn't work, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not suitable. That's telling me that you as a manager don't want to change because it's all comfortable for you. It's weird. Now, next is medical. And medical discrimination would be so-and-so is a diabetic. Oh no, he can't do that job. He has to be on the floor all the time, and he could get into medical trouble. Or he has to take time off because he's sick. Oh, we can't make him vice president or whatever, manager, because he needs to be on the floor. And if he's falling down all the time and drunk, or not drunk, but acting drunk, he can't do that. So we'll just keep him in the same position. We'll take this other person. Medical problems are individualized. Some of the people may have a good hold on their medical conditions. You have no right to assume Well, I had a sister who had diabetes, and, she was always said, well, that was your sister. That's not you. I'm sure you don't do everything the same that your brother does. So, you can't assume anything. Now, this may all be done behind closed doors, but you have a right to complain, and any HR department should open it up. And blaming the person because they've complained is not suitable either. You can't say, oh, well, this person and that person, blah, 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 blah. You need to be aware, and you need to handle it. If you observe any form of discrimination, you need to point it out and be prompt. You first have to ask, does the person feel he or she was discriminated about? Well, if someone says off-color jokes or off-color sexual jokes, makes inappropriate comments about people's sexual behaviors, gossips, this can all turn into very easily discriminatory practices. And you, as a manager or another employee, need to step up and say, I don't think that was funny. And I really wish you would stop in my presence. Now, if that continues to happen, go speak to your manager or to your HR department. Now, what happens if you go to your manager to issue a complaint? You're diligent, you wrote it all out, you wrote who the witnesses were, the dates it happened, times, and then your store manager says to you, oh, I wish your type were not so sensitive. Well, that's a concern. And if your manager says anything like that, you need to go to HR. Now, based on the seriousness of any situation, I always say to give your company 3 chances. 1, to your store manager. Keeping it within the store would be a great idea. Next would be your human resources representative. And last would be the head of HR. If all 3 of those don't act on the situation or tell you why it was not discriminatory, then I think you have right to take it outside the company. But first, give your company 3 chances to solve the issue. And then by all means, if they don't do anything about it, well, that's the time you take it out. You take it to human rights. You can do all sorts of things. However, 3 steps should be within the company. If they have someone who's not doing right practices, you should allow them to handle it. And if they don't, then take all the steps you need. So that's our first chat on discriminatory practices within companies. We'll be back with more, and should be more informative for you. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye now.